WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. Coming to you from Channel 16, Star Communications, also WCLN Radio, Summation and the Samson Weekly Newspaper. The name of the show is We Should Know. Some things that you already know if you're listening to this show. It has been extremely hot. Humidity range, unbelievable. We've seen all kinds of weather changes and patterns, and certainly we've had our impact here. A friend of ours always visits us, and we really appreciate him taking his time coming from the National Weather Service out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Nick Petro. Nick, thank you for your journey down to Clinton area today to talk to folks in this area about weather and what may or may not be going on. Some expectations, but I want to kind of open today, if it's okay. To remind folks that you are the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service. And with that position, you do a lot of educating the public, which is what we try to do, which is ideal. But one of the things I wanted to try to start with is it seems that this extreme hot weather and the patterns as a result of that is something that's been noted, particularly that July has been dubbed as the hottest July on record. Right. What do we make of all that in terms kind of that we can understand, I guess? What do we make of that?
Yeah. Well, JW, thank you so much for having me on the show again. It's Anytime. A pleasure to be here. And certainly, you know, the heat should remind folks that, you know, we just need to be ready to take precaution and, you know, do what we need to do to stay safe, because you know what? Heat can really kill folks and exhaust people quickly. You know, it sets in so fast. Personally, me, you know, when I'm out on a hot day cutting my grass, it's just like, man, it just hits you like a ton of bricks. And so you know, what are some good things to remember? You know, it's real simple. You know, try to do your outdoor work when it's cooler outside, like in the morning or in the evenings, or and drink plenty of water. That's the key. And you know, as the warning coordination meteorologist, one of my efforts is to educate the folks about what to do. But, you know, I'm human. Sometimes I forget my own advice. So I have to always remind myself, drink the water before I go outside. You know, because a lot of times what we do is wait until we're feeling the bearing of that heat on us. So one of the best things you can do if you have to be outside is hydrate before you get outside.
Nick, one of the things that struck me was a while back I was having this conversation with the person on the street, and I'm always getting input, and I really appreciate that from people about shows I need to do. And the comment was, well, I remember back in the 60s and so forth when it was hot and we were doing all this stuff in the field and we didn't think it. But there seems to be a different kind of intensity of heat as we have progressed over several decades. And a lot of folks are talking about that, and there's some discussion about that. The ozone and all this kind of thing, are we seeing a different intensity? Does folks going to the beach and lotion and stuff need to rethink how they do that?
Well, certainly, you know, there's, I'm not an expert in the long-term trends, but one thing I do know is that our nighttime lows are not as cold recently in the last several years as they typically are. So what happens is when it doesn't cool down as much at night, then it gets a jump start on the heating in the morning. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take as long to get to those extreme temperatures where the body is really being impacted when we're already starting out very warm. So while you know the trends and the data has shown increased warmth in the past couple months, past couple years, and there is a warming trend in general. A lot of that contribution is to warming of in elevated nighttime temperatures. So when you're starting off already warm, you're going to get to that warm to the hot phase much quicker. So the day, you know, the daytime seems exceedingly hot when it starts sooner in the day. So certainly that's just one of many contributions to this feeling that it's just more intense.
And you've worked in a number of locations as a meteorologist and settled in the region here in North Carolina out of the Raleigh office. these patterns are not only trackable, but they're something that's recognized, particularly somebody mentioned to me that is there a direct relationship to hurricanes and the heat and the humidity? Is that culpable in the result of what happens
in terms of the hurricane season, I wouldn't necessarily make a direct link between the heat that we've been experiencing and tropical cyclone, which tropical cyclone is sort of a general term for tropical storms and hurricanes. I wouldn't make that direct connection, comparing, say, average high temperatures. Where we can see influence to hurricane activity is the water temperatures. And the water temperatures, the ocean temperatures, remember, almost 3/4 of the planet is covered in water. So one of the biggest drivers of the weather pattern and the climate is the water temperatures. And as the water temperatures have been above normal in the Atlantic for the past couple of years, that certainly is one contributor to hurricane activity and where hurricanes form or don't form. So the water pattern or water temperature patterns out in the Pacific, the tropical or equatorial Pacific, known as the ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, that has a more direct link between temperature and hurricane activity in the Atlantic Basin. So where we have been for the past few months, we've been experiencing warmer than normal conditions in the equatorial Pacific. That warm trend is actually getting back closer to normal in terms of water temperature, I'm talking now. And the neutral, where it's not above or below, and a cooler phase tend to support Atlantic hurricane activity. So with the Pacific cooling, that is one reason why NOAA, for example, has increased its hurricane outlook for the rest of this hurricane season. Absolutely,
and since you brought that up, I wanted to talk about that a bit because that's one of the things that was put out in the last warning and just in this month. Right. The number of hurricanes, the number potentially that could impact the coast, and that came from the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which is kind of a big umbrella for the National Weather Service that looks at that data. How close, when we think about the patterns, how has the predictability increased over the past few years in looking at where hurricanes may or may not, or the numbers of hurricanes? Is all that data put into some kind of computer program and then it gives this information out, or is it just as a result of study by many scientists like yourself and others?
Right, it's a combination of all those. Number one, we have long-term models that can predict weather explicitly seasons into the future. So, we can track those trends in the models and see if it's a little bit more active or less active or right where it should be in terms of tropical storm and hurricane development. In addition to that, we have more statistical linkage. So, for example, as I mentioned, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, whether it's El Nino, whether it's La Nina, or whether it's neutral, and the downstream impacts on the overall weather pattern that has. The Atlantic water temperatures is another contributor to the seasonal predictions that we get. And so when you look at the actual explicit modeling of the oceans and how they support or don't support tropical storm formation, in combination with these more historical statistical comparisons to previous years, that's the general big picture of how NOAA puts together its seasonal outlooks. And certainly, once we saw the trend for this year, once we saw the trend of the water temperatures in the Pacific cooling, that is, like I said, one of the main contributors why NOAA has increased its outlook. In fact, the initial outlook, which was released in May from NOAA, called for a normal season, which a normal season would be 12 named storms in the Atlantic, 6 of which become hurricanes and 3 of which become major hurricanes. Now, since the temperatures, the water temperature out in the Pacific has cooled, that has a downstream effect on tropical storm and hurricane formation potential. So NOAA increased its outlook to 10 to 17 named storms, 5 to 9 of which could become hurricanes, and 2 to 4 major hurricanes. So that's not a major increase or trend in terms of the outlook, but the one thing I always come back to when it comes to seasonal hurricane outlooks is that it only takes one storm. We need to prepare for that one storm, regardless of what that outlook or those numbers show. There could just be one storm in the whole Atlantic season, but if that one storm hits us, then it's been a really bad year for us.
Could be a tragedy, and then we go through the whole thing. One of the things that I think a lot of folks have gotten, I don't think you ever get accustomed to it, but you get familiar with the impact, and that is the water versus the wind.
Oh, yeah. And the last few years have pointed out that, when it comes to hurricanes, we need to be thinking about water. Storm surge at the coast, river and flash flooding inland.
Is there any predictabilities that exist with water? And I know there's been a lot of discussion about river hydrology and all those kinds of things. Are we any better now than we were 10 years or 15 years ago on predictability of volume of water and how we're able to process that and dispense it?
Yeah. And certainly, when it comes to our modeling predictive processes, we can model just about anything that happens, over and over again, including how rivers behave to rainfall. And that is our primary tool for predicting water, river levels, flooding. And those have increased. Our accuracy in the modeling capabilities have definitely increased for modeling rivers, even local streams. The National Water Center and the national is developing a national water model to even model and simulate local small streams. So, and those local small streams contribute to the bigger rivers. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a sort of a total water concept. We have to look at every source of the water, where it's flowing, and how it's moving downstream, and the impact of that water reaching to coastal areas where, during hurricanes, oftentimes we see the storm surge, obviously having an impact on backing up river systems. So it is a total water approach when we are looking at water and potential flooding impacts during tropical storms and hurricanes.
When we come back from this break, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about that. I know in the past few months we've talked to everybody from FEMA to emergency management folks, and I'm kind of looking for some solution results somewhere, how we solve some of these problems. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned. We're talking with the National Weather Service. Nick.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. I want to remind you that you can email us at weshouldknowedu@gmail.com, weshouldknowedu@gmail.com, or if you want to drop us a letter, postcard, whatever, Post Office Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina, 28329 is the Post Office Box zip code. Of course, the zip code for this area is 28328. But anyway, reach out and communicate with us. Let us know what you think, what's going on, what I should have asked that I didn't ask, what I need to ask the next time, all that stuff. I'd like to hear from you and get your input. We're talking with Nick Petro with the National Weather Service. Nick just happens to be the warning coordinator, warning coordination meteorologist. Pretty long words, pretty big titles, but primarily, from what I can understand, that just simply means you're trying to educate the public.
Yeah, it's a part of our management team at the local National Weather Service office. The warning coordination meteorologist has the responsibility of being the liaison between National Weather Service products and services and our core partners and the users and the public. Mm-hmm. So that includes an education and outreach component. Not only do I oversee the warning program and the accuracy of it and the success of it, but also to make sure that when people receive our warnings, they know what to do. They know how to react. They know how to build plans for building their safety, their severe weather safety plans. While it'll be impossible to prevent loss of life due to hazardous weather, if we can somehow mitigate that and help people prepare, if people know what to do when severe weather strikes, then that's our goal, to help people save their lives and protect their property and save their loved ones when impacts from water, from wind, from lightning, from even winter weather, from hot weather, cold weather. We want to prepare the folks, educate them so they know what to do. Basic, simple safety rules can help save lives.
One of the things we were talking about before we went to break was this whole idea of water. We've seen an increase, it just seems to be, the volume of water that gets retained. And for some reason there seems to be this, and it could be growth, it could be rooftops or whatever, but water has to go somewhere. So if the aquifers and the streams and all of these kinds of things are blocked for whatever reason,
right,
how quick can that cause a devastating effect with the volume of water that's coming downstream?
Well, there's a lot of factors that depend. In every basin, every drainage way, every water passage is unique. And there's a lot of factors, some natural, some human influenced factors that basically determine how water is going to flow, how fast and how readily and easily it drains out. Now, flooding, that happens. It's unfortunate, but it's inevitable because when you think about the rain, when it rains on any given place, that water has to go somewhere, right? It's part of the natural water cycle. We all learned about it in grade school, the water cycle, right? It rains, it falls on the earth and it drains into the rivers and that goes to the ocean and then it evaporates, goes back into the sky, turns back into rain, and the whole process repeats. So, when it rains, that part of the water cycle, it's got to go somewhere. Now, if too much rain falls in too quick of a time for those natural drainage systems, and when I say drainage systems, I mean the streams, the creeks that flow into the larger drainage systems,
even
like the rivers.
Ditches beside
The ditches. So those are we have the human drainage systems, the ditches, the culverts, the human-made passages for water to flow, because that water has to get to the stream somehow. And then that stream needs to feed into the rivers, and the rivers feed into the ocean. So whenever that drainage system just simply can't handle the volume of water, what does it do? It backs up. It doesn't. It's like congestion on a highway. When if a road becomes blocked, the cars are just going to back up.
Absolutely.
So same thing with water. When the drainage system gets backed up or slowed down, that water has nowhere to go but back up, and the end result is flooding.
I just saw a vision of I-40 trying to get into Raleigh when you said cars and backed up.
It happens every day.
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
Right.
So when we look at that and realize and kind of process that, we start seeing that these particular ditches, roads, creeks, rivers need to be opened.
Right.
And the big problem, I think, oftentimes everyone tends to look at someone else and say, okay, it's that organization's responsibility, it's DOT, it's somebody else. The individuals that you communicate with, which is the larger public population, should it be part of the total awareness and effort of everyone?
Right.
Whether it's, I tell people sometimes where you're throwing cups out beside the road or whatever you're doing, it has an impact.
Oh yeah, and one thing we always hear after every storm is I never thought it would flood here. It's never done this before. I mean, how many times have you heard that phrase?
We've been to Neverland several times.
We've never had this happen. I mean, I hear that after every storm. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody to basically do a simple survey of their surroundings and take note of drainages, take note of how water flows around your home or off your business, off your building, how it flows down the road or how it flows down the creek or the ditch, and just kind of get a sense for, hey, am I prone to possible flooding? Maybe perhaps check out some online flood maps. And one of the biggest things that people could do to prepare, if they can, is purchase flood insurance. Flood insurance, even for folks who do not live in an established or known floodplain, flood insurance is still not a bad thing to have, because if how many times have we seen flooding occur in places that are not in the floodplain or in the flood zone or the 100-year flood map?
500 years.
I mean, water's got to flow everywhere, right? I mean, water's got to flow from every location, whether it's in a flood plain or not, right? So even if that local location backs up, flooding can occur. So, flood insurance is for places that generally are outside of established floodplains. flood insurance is not terribly expensive. So, it's worth it, I think, is for folks to take a look at, and certainly is worth considering. And that's part of the bigger preparedness package. When you're preparing for the hurricane season, or any season for that matter, the winter season or the spring severe weather season, you have to take a look, kind of at the big picture, the sort of 50,000 foot level of what your risk is. Do you live near a known flood location? Do you live in a place where, it has been known to flood before or is prone or susceptible to severe weather? And when it comes to flooding in water, that's what folks need to do, is look around, take an assessment, look at some historical records, see if it's ever flooded at your location or near your location, and plan accordingly.
And the sheer volume of people and animals increasing might be the reason that they've never had that happen before in 500 years or 100 years, but now we got more people, we got more rooftops, we got more displacement of water.
And there's a lot of factors, certainly, there's many factors, including land use and land changes and adaptation, but, but regardless of the specific reason, we all need to prepare.
And take that as an initial prevention act.
Right.
And the consideration of flood insurance is also part of the recovery, because if you don't have flood insurance, your recovery may be, to some people, the rest of their life, because it takes them that long to pay for it.
Absolutely. Could drain away a lifetime savings.
One of the things I've noticed in some of our weather patterns as well is something that we've kind of seen in this area, and many folks have probably been impacted by it. It's called straight line winds versus tornadoes versus hurricanes. Right. Do we not take seriously enough those warnings when we get them about tornadoes and the potential of 50, 60 plus mile an hour winds? Do we kind of think, that's just a thunderstorm coming through? Right.
So, I tend to think that a lot of times folks underestimate the power of a thunderstorm, of a severe thunderstorm, and in some cases severe thunderstorm warnings. And straight line winds. So what I mean by straight line wind is just ordinary wind pushing out in a given direction versus, say, wind damage from a tornado, which is a circular wind. So the straight line wind is much more common than tornadoes. Straight line winds can produce damage that looks just like tornadoes. And I will point out that straight line wind is much more common than tornadoes. People need to, I think, take our severe thunderstorm warnings more seriously, and always, whenever you receive those warnings, get indoors, seek shelter, because when we issue those warnings, that means we expect high winds that can produce tornado-like damage, even though it's not a tornado warning per se. And certainly this year has been no different than many other years, where we've had several instances of these straight-line wind damage events that can produce, like I said, tornado-like damage.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit in depth, in the sense that when you have a warning and that warning comes out, not a watch, but a warning, the inevitability with a warning is that it's either approaching or there's a high likelihood that you'll be impacted. You can zero in on that. So folks have been told to do a number of things. Talk about some of those things that how they should respond when they see that warning or they hear that warning. What's the initial thought that should go through their process?
Well, social science studies have shown that when somebody receives a warning, they more often than not want to try to get confirmation that there's something bad about to happen to them, and they'll look for other sources. So unfortunately, sometimes that delays people's reaction and what they do. So one thing we always try to encourage folks to do is to don't delay that process of seeking shelter. While it may be so important, you want to find out whether it's calling a friend or turning on the radio, maybe turning on TV or flipping through some websites. The time to do that can take time finding shelter. That can take away that time, that necessary time to find shelter. So when you receive regardless of what kind of warning it is, if it's a tornado warning, whether it's a severe thunderstorm warning or any other type of warning, you need to do what you need to do to protect your life and property immediately. And since you mentioned the straight line winds, same situation there with severe thunderstorm warnings. We warn people about straight line wind hazards through our severe thunderstorm warning. When you receive a severe thunderstorm warning, get inside. and basically stay away from windows. And, we all pretty much carry cell phones with us these days, smartphones. So if you want to get that confirmation, do so after you've sought shelter.
We'll take another break. We'll be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, caller friends, stay tuned. We're talking about weather, how it impacts you with Nick Petro with the National Weather Service. We'll be back in a moment.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that has a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. We Should Know is on the air. As I said in the opening, we appreciate your commentary, your support. The suggestions you have is important to us. Email us at weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. A number of folks I've seen in various counties as I've traveled around, and people will say, well, I wish you would have get somebody on, or you talk to somebody about so-and-so, or find out about, we mentioned today about flood insurance. We could have folks to talk more in detail about that. But today we're fortunate to have Nick Petro with us, who is the warning meteorologist, coordination meteorologist. You've probably seen Nick shoulder to shoulder with the governors in the Florence disaster and various other emergency management organizations throughout the state. Nick, you've been doing this for some years. As we went off air to go to break, we were talking about these straight line winds and the warning impacts and so forth. Help us understand, the National Weather Service is the originator of a lot of information that comes through the media sources, to include TV, whatever network you listen to. So that information is scientifically being generated and immediately disseminated as soon as you see it, correct?
It's an amazing dissemination network. The National Weather Service, as you pointed out, we do originate the warning. So no matter how you receive a warning, whether it's on your cell phone, a favorite cell phone app, TV, radio, however it is that you receive tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, flood warnings, winter storm warnings, hurricane warnings, you name the warning, they originate from the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service is the government agency with the sole responsibility, or the sole government agency, I should say, with the responsibility of issuing weather watches, warnings, and advisories for the protection of life and property of the United States and its territories.
And it has a huge array of technical and radar equipment to monitor these things, not only just in the Raleigh region,
right,
but in the Wilmington region, other
right,
states, and you can see these things when we see those global pictures.
Sure.
I encourage people to go to the website you guys have got. It's got some amazing graphics on there.
And it's an easy to remember website too, weather.gov. It opens the door to an amazing, vast array of data. And you know what? All of our data is there free for people to use. We're taxpayer funded, we're a federal government agency, so there's no additional charge for anything you pull from us at the National Weather Service. It's all there for people to take advantage and use. And certainly the tools that we use include the radar, the satellite data, and there has been some fascinating advancements in satellite data. The lightning data from our new satellites, the surface observing equipments at all the airports, and all the data that we gather from our partners too. What we do at the National Weather Service, while we originate the warnings, and we have a team of meteorologists who are at every forecast office. The National Weather Service has 122 forecast offices around the country in the U.S. territories. While we have a team of meteorologists who are on the clock 24/7, 365, monitoring the weather and issuing the warnings when needed, we work very closely with our partners. Our core partners include emergency managers, first responders, local, city, county, state government agencies that also have a similar mission of protection of life and property, and the media. We can't, at the National Weather Service, do this massive mission of protection of life and property ourselves. We rely heavily on building partnerships with government agencies, with local cities, communities, towns, counties, and the state emergency management officials, and as I pointed out, the media. Because when you turn on the local TV station and you get our warnings, our media partners are helping us distribute those warnings that we issue. We're there at our office for this area. Of course, our office is that serves this area is located in Raleigh. Mm-hmm. So our team of meteorologists are in Raleigh. We're watching the weather. We're issuing our warnings. But we rely, as I said, on partnerships with the media to help push that information out, to disseminate our warnings.
So when we hear something, for example, a big buzzword in media has been dual Doppler radar. What does all that mean to the layperson?
Well, many of the local TV stations have some of their own equipment that does weather surveillance, like radar, like surface observing equipment, temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, that sort of thing. So it's up to the individual private company, the private privately owned TV stations and whatnot to basically purchase, install, and use whatever data equipment they want. That's kind of that varies from station to station and what they want to call their tools. Certainly they too, as partners of ours, are welcome and they do make use of National Weather Service data, observational data, such as our radar data, satellite data, and surface observation.
Are you satisfied that the National Weather Service, particularly in this area, has the most current technological information coming from the most current equipment and systems?
Oh, absolutely. I think our radar network is very robust. There's great overlap. So if, for example, if one radar is down for maintenance, we have an array of radars that cover the state. So we can use neighboring radars to overlap that data. We have great surface equipment that is monitored 24 hours a day. If something fails, any component with our surface observing equipment at every airport, we are notified by phone and we dispatch our technicians out to repair that. We have state-of-the-art satellites in space. The new GO-16 satellite, recently installed in the last 2 years, has some of the best technology, most advanced technology for imaging the atmosphere and doing thermal sensing of the atmosphere to basically provide better observations of the Earth. And to help us with our modeling. It's a fascinating time, and to be a meteorologist, because a lot of these technologies and these improvements are driven by advancements and shrinking, if you will, of computers, the size of computers, and the increase of their speed. Imagine, just think of computers, how much smaller they are. Phones, cell phones, how much smaller they are. Any kind of technological device is shrinking, but at the same time, it's getting more robust and more and faster and cheaper. So we're able to leverage the improvement in technology and leverage the reduction in their cost to make continuous upgrades and improvements to our observation, our detecting equipment, and our modeling. And that is just fascinating time. In the 20 or so years I've been in the National Weather Service, I have seen just an incredible advancement in the technology and the equipment that we use at the National Weather Service.
And that data and that information not only covers the initial, but the impact and the recovery modes of any kind of event that comes through.
Well, exactly, and certainly, our forecasts have been showing clear improvements. The accuracy is even for me, who I prepare these forecasts nearly every day, it's amazing. I am just myself personally amazed at how great those forecasts are. It's the atmosphere, the weather's the weather. It's going to do what it's going to do. It can't be perfect all the time. We can only simulate it so well, but even still, I think we're at a time now where, the technology to detect severe weather, the dissemination methods, the cell phone methodology. When the wireless emergency alert system was deployed in 2012, only a select few cell phones had that capability to receive, tornado and flash flood warnings and a variety of other warnings. Now, nearly everybody, here in 2019, every phone has wireless emergency alerts already installed. So back is short time ago, say 10 years ago, how did people get tornado warnings? There was only a handful of ways they could get tornado warnings, whether they had the TV or radio on, maybe if they had a no-weather radio, maybe if the community had a siren. Now, in 2019, everybody gets our tornado warnings because nearly everybody has a cell phone. And with the wireless emergency alert system, those little very brief text messages that are pushed out to cell phones, like the Amber Alerts that people receive on their phones, that has just really closed the gap in terms of the number of people who can't receive the warning because they didn't have a way to. Now everybody gets the warnings. And whenever I go out and do storm surveys, and I ask folks, hey, did you get the warning? Do you have time to prepare? And the answer I hear almost all the time is, yeah, I got your warning before it hit. Yeah. I had time to go seek shelter.
What is the average time, Nick, for that you have seen that people have from the time you put the information out in minutes, or is it?
Well, our goal is to provide, between 10 and 15 minutes of lead time, as we call it. That's our goal, and it doesn't mean we can give 10 or 15 minutes with every tornado warning or severe thunderstorm warnings. Sometimes that warning time is much longer than 15 minutes. Other times it's only a minute or two because every storm is unique. Especially in this part of the country, tornadoes spin up very quickly and they don't last very long, and they're particularly difficult to provide advanced lead time. But that's why it's important. The moment you receive that tornado warning on your cell phone and it says tornado warning for this area, seek shelter now, that's what you have to do. You have to stop what you're doing and get into your shelter.
Because from the back end that word warning, quote, tornado warning, if it's a tornado or a thunderstorm or whatever, the word warning means that you've actually seen that in the technology you have. You've actually seen it.
Right. Or it's been detected by our by humans, by people who've seen it and called it in to say they called it into 911, or maybe one of our trained weather spotters saw it and gave us a call. So we issue warnings anytime our technology, such as our radar, sees it, or if humans see it. And we get that information back at our office. That'll prompt, those two things prompt warnings.
And the dependability that you have for those weather spotters is critical too.
Oh, we train them. Nearly every month we offer a couple classes. Every month they're free classes. People can go on our website at weather.gov/Raleigh, click on the Skywarn link if anybody's interested in learning how to be a weather spotter for us.
We're going to continue that after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned and we'll tell you a little bit more what weather spotters do and what the responsibility is if you choose to do that. Call a friend. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank you for being with us today. I want to thank all of you that call in or see the show and remind me that, hey, I'm looking at you, whether it's in Pender County, Bladen County, even Johnston County, and we have some viewers and listeners in Wake County that will see the show. Keep in mind, we upload this to YouTube, so you can probably see that a week or two after we have the origination of the show. And give us some comments on that. If you're from some other part of the state or part of the world as far as that goes, we've had communication from people throughout the world on what we're talking about. We try to talk to experts. One of those experts today is Nick Petro with the National Weather Service. And Nick, the warning coordination meteorologist, you get a lot of questions, and I know one of those is what we're talking about when we went to break a while ago, was how do you become or how do you get involved in being a Skywarn storm spotter? That's always kind of a fascinating thing, because I, for one, like to, I'm not one of these people that's going to get out in the middle of a tornado and look at it, but it always amazes me to look at the dynamic and power of the weather. Right.
Weather is something that, we could track with our technology, our radar, satellites, surface observing equipment. But the radar, for example, tells us what's happening in the sky. What's happening in the sky will impact people on the ground. Our radar doesn't tell us what's happening at the ground, right?
That's right.
So people tell us what's happening at the ground. As I like to say, the radar tells us what's happening in the sky. People tell us what's happening at the ground. So one of the most important aspects of our warning program is to get what we call ground truth. What exactly is happening? What did that storm produce? Did that storm cause flooding? Did that storm knock a few trees down? Did it do nothing? Did it produce hail? Are there power outages? What exactly were the impacts of that storm? And during a warning situation, when severe weather is occurring, we have people at the National Weather Service dedicated to reaching out and collecting this ground truth information. With that, to complement that effort, we train weather enthusiasts to be, as we call it, weather spotters, and it has the program has a name. It's called Skywarn, and essentially we invite anybody with an interest in weather. Anybody, you don't have to have any background knowledge of science or weather. If you have an interest in weather, we invite you to take a class, and we offer this class free of charge. We do them in person. They're 90-minute long classes, and we also offer virtual or online classes for people who can't go and take one in person to learn about, number one, how to stay safe during severe weather. Number two, how to observe severe weather. Number three, what, when, and why and how to report severe weather that they observe to the National Weather Service. So, the ground truth is such a big part of what we do in terms of our warning process, because we use that ground truth to kind of calibrate what we're seeing on radar. So, for example, let's say we're tracking a storm with our radar, and it produces some wind damage, and we get a phone call from a spotter who says they saw, a tree get blown over. And then we take that information, we back the radar up to match the time that observation was taken, with tree falling down, and we say, okay, here's what the radar looked like at that time. Now fast forward to the present time, we can then look at the radar signatures and say, okay, has the storm increased in strength? Well, if it has increased in strength, then chances are, instead of it being one tree down, it might be a whole swath of trees down. Or maybe the storm weakened. So instead of one tree falling down, it might, with a weakened storm, maybe no impacts will happen. So that's kind of a quick kind of summary of what Skywarn's all about. It's the ground truth, and that helps us with our warning decision process.
How about the volume of calls? I mean, depending on how many people you have in an area, do you get overwhelmed with volume of calls of Skywarn trained people?
No, not necessarily. So far, we have found that we have roughly about 3,000 weather spotters, trained spotters, across all of central North Carolina, including areas from just east of I-77 in the western Piedmont to roughly the I-95 corridor and a little bit further east. That's kind of the bounds of our coverage area for the Raleigh office. So in that area, we have about 3,000 trained spotters. Now, keep in mind, severe weather isn't affecting that entire area all at once. So we only may have a handful of spotters being affected at any one time, and fortunately, we're able to handle that volume of calls. Plus, there's other ways that people can report severe weather. We have a cell phone app that people can use to report severe weather that they observe on their cell phone, or that they can transmit to us on their cell phone. We have a website form that people can fill out. And about a third of our Skywarn spotters are amateur radio operators, and we have dedicated amateur radio nets established where amateur radio operators can get on their radio systems and report severe weather that way.
And those amateur radio operators are critical, because at some point in time, if the disaster is large enough and a huge enough issue, there may be no other form of communication.
Absolutely, yeah. Amateur radio is essentially, helps kind of provide that necessary information link when all other forms of communication are down. Absolutely. These radio operators oftentimes carry around handheld radios that are battery powered. So they'll have that power and that capability, and they can pass important information from operator to operator to help, help with, during an event and even during the recovery phase of a hazardous weather event.
I'm about to ask you something that a lot of folks will probably say, well, you ask him a question that everybody's supposed to know, and that is the preparedness piece. If they get the warning's there, what should folks do? And I know they've heard over and over again, an inside room and all that kind of thing.
Right.
But I don't think you can hear that enough. Walk through the process and let us know.
And there's one particular warning type I really want to focus on, and that is the flash flood warnings. We have seen so many people, just lives lost, needless loss of life associated with flash flooding because people driving into areas where they shouldn't. You know, it's important for folks to remember, when you see a barricade up on the highway showing, you know, roads flooded, you know, roads closed, there's a barricade, don't go around that barricade. And then, you know, even if there's not a barricade and you come across an area where water covers the roadway, don't go in it, because you never can tell what the condition of the road is underneath that water. So, you know, we have a saying at the National Weather Service, turn around, don't drown. Don't drive into areas where water covers the road.
No matter how big your truck is.
No matter how big your truck is, absolutely. I mean, there's video footage of high clearance vehicles, rescue vehicles, getting swamped by flood waters that couldn't get across flooded areas. So it doesn't matter how big your vehicle is, just take time to find another route. You know, when you hear that when you get that flash flood warning on your cell phone, because that'll be delivered via wireless emergency alerts, you'll get that on your cell phone. That means that flooding is possible around you, near or around you. So if you get that and you're out there driving, you need to be really looking around for flooded areas. And if you come across an area where water covers the road, turn around. Find another way. Turn around.
It doesn't matter if it's 6 inches or 2 foot.
Absolutely. Doesn't matter. Certainly, you know, you just don't want to take that chance. When it comes to things like tornado warnings, you know, figure out in advance where that interior room is that you could seek shelter. Put as many walls between you and the outside when you're seeking shelter during a tornado. And finally, severe thunderstorm warnings. Let's not underestimate the severity or the dangers associated with straight line winds and large hail. If you get a severe thunderstorm warning, just get inside. You know, it may be, you know, you don't have to, you know, hunker down in an interior room on, you know, so much on the lowest floor like you would with a tornado, but at least get inside and stay away from windows during severe thunderstorm warnings. Get inside, stay away from windows. And then if it gets upgraded to a tornado warning, then get into your interior room, put as many walls between you and the outside.
The other thing that seems like a lot of folks have noticed, and I guess it's because media is reporting a lot of this, with heat and the heat extremes that we're seeing so many cases of young children left in cars and parents, and I mean, it's just almost like every other day you'll see a case where somebody went in shopping for 40 or 50 minutes and left a kid in a car and the temperature is 100 degrees. It's almost like it's paralyzing to folks as old as I am. It's like, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
Why would you leave your children?
I can't understand it. I you know, having kids of my own, I just don't understand how that would. I just couldn't.
I mean,
imagine.
we've seen case after case.
Yeah.
From New York to you name it, all over the country, and it's either we're getting more reporting on it, or it's just some unusual anomaly that folk, if they're that busy, then they might need to check in with somebody and say, I'm not capable of looking after my children.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I don't mean to be too harsh, but at the same time,
I think you know, people live busy lives and are always rushing somewhere, rushing here, rushing there, and you know, trying to just pack as much in as a day they can. You know, and I think people just make bad choices in saying, all right, well, I'm just going to run in and you know, pay this bill, or run in and grab my mail from the P.O. box or something like that. And you know, and that's a lot of times when we see folks, you know, leaving kids and perhaps even, you know, elderly relatives or parents, or maybe even the pets in the car. Even if the car is running, you know, what if that car stalls or something like that? You know, I mean, it's just not worth it. You know, take your kid inside with you.
Absolutely.
Don't leave people in the back seat when it's hot outside.
Never should happen, and it should be. We shouldn't even be talking about warning people about it. You know
it's amazing we have to. Yeah.
Exactly. It's totally crazy.
Yeah.
So we got about 50, 60 minutes. I want to give you to just kind of wrap anything we've missed. Things you want to make sure you get out there, because it's literally an annual thing. We get you to come down and talk to us and make sure we're getting all the information out. Any contact information you have would be good for folks to know as well.
Yeah. Certainly, folks are encouraged to check out our website at weather.gov/Raleigh for all of the pertinent information for Central North Carolina and the coastal plain of North Carolina. Certainly want to encourage people to visit. And you know, we're in the hurricane season. So people need to prepare. Don't wait till the last minute to get those storm kit supplies. Check out your surroundings, your business, your home. Make sure you're prepared. Check out ready.gov for tips on how to prepare for the hurricane season. And you know, when it comes to hurricanes, tropical storms, don't worry so much about the category. Think water. Think flood potential. That's what we have to be concerned about these days with hurricanes and tropical storms.
ever done any studies on why people go to the grocery store and buy bread and milk?
Haven't quite figured that out.
That's a social psychological study. I want to see the results.
But if you're going to go to the store, get some water and batteries.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for being with us today, and thank you for your time journeying down to sit in the studio and have a conversation about something that is not only vital interest here, but particularly, as you mentioned, this time of the year. It's going to happen. So thanks for coming.
Thank you, JW. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you next week on We Should Know. And as always, we want to remind you to continue to contact us, stay in touch, let us know what you're thinking about. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.